Today on NuggetCast, AngularJS, what it is and what you can do with it.
Sir? I think we found him.
Good. Who does it look like we're dealing with?
It's Powers. I think this one's big.
Garth? It's Powers again. How close are you?
Almost there, sir. He's not getting away with it this time. Almost there.
Good. I'm sending you the coordinates we've intercepted.
Is that you, old Garth? You thought you could defeat me? No. Not this time. I thought you learned last time not to mess with me. I'm not to be toyed with.
Powers, I don't care what kind of terror you cause. Today is the day you die.
I'd like to see you try.
Sir, I found it. I found the bomb.
Just walk me through how to deactivate it. We don't have much time.
Is it one of Powers' standard bombs?
It appears that way, yeah.
Okay. Flip the circuit board around so you can get to the wires on the back, then cut the yellow wire. But make sure it's a clean cut. Don't put any pressure on any of the wires.
Nope, that won't cut anything.
What's happening? What's going on?
I can't find anything to cut with.
We gave you the best tool ever. Now you're telling me you don't know how to use it?
Did you not watch the video?
Just give me a minute. I can figure it out. How hard can it be?
Get out now! If you don't know how to use the tool, you're killing yourself!
No, I got this.
You will die, Garth!
Welcome to NuggetCast. I'm your host, Steve Barth, and today we're exploring AngularJS. For web programmers, staying current on all the tools available to them and understanding what each of those tools does best is key to their success. Now, one of these tools is called AngularJS. So let's go to our CBT Nuggets AngularJS trainer, Ben Finkel, to learn a bit more. Ben, welcome
Steve.
to NuggetCast. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How about yourself, Steve?
Doing fantastic. So today we're talking AngularJS.
That's right.
What in the world is AngularJS?
AngularJS is a really cool client-side web development framework that uses JavaScript and applies an MVC pattern to it to make it all work together.
Can you go into a little bit more of a simple explanation of what AngularJS is?
Sure thing. So traditionally, web applications have been server-side, and what that means is when you, Steve, open up a web application or a web page, you send a request out to the server, and it does all the processing. It does all the heavy lifting to figure out what it is it needs to give back to your screen, your computer, and then it just turns over some real simple static HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code that you display on your screen. Now that's really cool, but recently, a lot of new client-side technologies have shown up that let you actually utilize your client PC, your computer, Steve, to do some of that work and some of that lifting. And that affords a lot of advantages to us as developers. For instance, it lets us localize web pages right there on your computer. So as a developer, I no longer have to program every different localization option into a web page, your computer knows how to display dates and numbers for whatever region of the world you happen to be in, and it can figure out how to do that for me, so I don't have to program it. It also does things like reduce the number of trips, the amount of communication that has to happen between your computer and a server that's on the other side of the internet. So it can really speed up your web applications, make them a lot more responsive and a lot more fun.
Okay. Now, you mentioned MVC.
Yeah?
Can you explain what MVC is?
Sure. MVC stands for Model View Controller, and that's what we call a design pattern, and it's a real popular pattern. It's a way of structuring or organizing or architecting your code into certain buckets and separating the responsibilities of your code into those different buckets, those buckets being the model, the view, and the controller. So in the web world right now, it's real popular. A lot of different technologies are utilizing it. And what it helps you do as a developer is know where your code needs to go. When you sit down and say, okay, I've got to write a piece of code that's going to do X or Y or Z, you know where to put it. Does it go in the model? Does it go in the view? It's a guideline, a design pattern, they call it. And then that also helps other people understand your code when they come to look at it. So somebody comes along and wants to look at a piece of code that you wrote, or maybe 6 months, a year later, you've got to look at a piece of code that you already wrote. You can know where you're going to find the different pieces of functionality because you know it follows the MVC design pattern.
So now, back in my days of web development, which, that was a long time ago, we were using just like HTML and CSS to program pages. So
Sure.
What does AngularJS bring that's new and different?
Well, sure. So originally when the World Wide Web was developed, I think this was back in the 18th century,
Yes.
they didn't think that it was going to be dynamic and flexible. They didn't imagine the kind of web applications that we're going to have today, the cool search engines and the Netflixes and all those things. So HTML, the basic underlying language of web development, web pages, is very static. It's great for displaying content, and it makes it easy to format your content, but it's not responsive. It doesn't answer to your mouse clicks. It doesn't have ways, it doesn't have hooks to respond to what you as the user want it to do. So they eventually developed JavaScript, which was kind of the answer to that question. HTML was designed to display your content, where JavaScript is a scripting language, a programming language that responds to user events. It's the functionality of the web page. But JavaScript can be a little bit cumbersome to work with. It's very verbose, it's very loose kind of programming language, and it makes it so that sometimes your code in JavaScript is difficult to read, it's difficult to organize, and it's not very useful. So AngularJS and its counterparts try to solve a lot of those problems by bringing some organization and some structure and updating how you develop web applications on the front end, that's your client side, in order to resolve those problems. Angular itself does some really cool things. It turns HTML into a dynamic language. So it extends that HTML library so that HTML is no longer just this static presentation language, but actually can update and display your data dynamically based on what you as the user want to see, what you want to do. It does that through something called data binding. And then on top of that, it does other cool things like Model View Controller that we talked about. It sort of drapes that Model View Controller pattern onto your JavaScript and provides a real solid architecture and a real solid structure for your JavaScript code so that it's easily readable and legible, and it's got a better structure to it.
Sounds very cool.
Yeah, it is cool.
So how does Angular... let me try that question again. So how does AngularJS differentiate itself from those other client-side frameworks?
Well, a lot of the client-side frameworks out there right now, and it's a very popular thing right now, they try to abstract away the HTML code. That's kind of their answer to the problem of HTML being static, is they say, okay, we're going to create a new scripting language or a new content presentation language that's more dynamic, and they abstract it away and create a wall between you and the HTML. It's kind of tough as a developer. You have to learn a new language, and you're not always certain what your HTML is going to look like when that library is done converting that abstracted language back into HTML. Some of those languages also move all of the manipulation into JavaScript libraries themselves, which is powerful. JavaScript's a very powerful language, but it also means that it's not clear if you're looking at the HTML page what may or may not be happening behind the scenes in that JavaScript library. So you don't know that this HTML page you're looking at has some cool dynamic JavaScript capabilities programmed in. So that creates a lot of kind of code that's not especially well structured. It's not a proper separation of responsibilities in your code. And it can create some confusion both for you as the web developer as well as people down the line who have to look at or maintain that code that you've written. So AngularJS takes a different approach. AngularJS, by the way, their mission statement there is to simplify the web development experience, and they do a great job of it. They try to extend the HTML vocabulary. So they actually use HTML, the static language that it used to be, and they expand on it, they extend it so that it has these dynamic elements to it. Uses things like expressions, filters, and directives that look like HTML and use something called declarative programming so that it's this really cool, easy to read, easy to understand HTML document that you're looking at that is actually an AngularJS dynamic web application. It's a cool way to merge these two technologies. And then it uses some different cool things in the backend in the JavaScript, not just the MVC pattern, but something called Dependency Injection. And what that does is that allows you to use plain old JavaScript in the background. You don't have to have a lot of fancy custom libraries in your JavaScript to make Angular work. You simply inject what you need into the JavaScript code, and then your JavaScript uses the AngularJS libraries from there. All of that lumps together to make code that's really easy to understand, it's easy to read, and it's easy to program as us as developers, and it's really a lot of fun to use.
Okay, so there are lots of options for programming for a website. Do I need to choose between AngularJS and other framework?
You don't, and that's one of my favorite parts of AngularJS. It's incredibly interoperable. So because it's using the existing HTML vocabulary, it fits in real nicely with, say, your existing technology stack. Whatever you've got on the server side can spit out custom JavaScript that feeds into your AngularJS application. It can spit out custom HTML that's going to work with your AngularJS application. On top of that, it is easily extendable so that you can integrate it with whatever other client-side frameworks you might be using. It works real nicely with all those. It can be changed and manipulated so that it's going to fit in real nicely with any other client-side framework. And this means that something like jQuery, for instance, which is incredibly popular, actually ships right with AngularJS. It uses a lot of jQuery hooks in order to do some of the HTML manipulation that jQuery is so good at and AngularJS tries to avoid doing.
So, any final thoughts on AngularJS before we end the show? What should we leave the show knowing?
You should leave the show definitely knowing that AngularJS is a ton of fun to work with. I've been learning it for the past year, and it is just a blast. It really brings back a lot of that wow factor of programming. A couple of lines of code, it does something really incredible, and you go, huh, look at that. And it really opens up the possibilities. It's so much fun to work with and so much fun to program. I can't stress that enough, that it's really, really a cool technology, a really neat technology, and there's a good reason that it's so popular right now.
So, that's it for this episode. Remember, we have past episodes of the show available on YouTube, iTunes, and the CBT Nuggets blog. Those addresses right here. And remember to contact us with ideas or topics you'd like to see us cover in future episodes. Have a fantastic month, and remember, know your tools and how to use them.
Not bad, I misunderstood. Is that you again, old Garth? I've forgotten my next line. Do you want to see my bomb? It's very nice bomb, no? I am powers, and I have powers, and you are powerless. Do you see how the pun works? I see you, Mr. Good Guy. You're not looking in the right direction. I can't believe I forgot my 2 lines again. I would like to say line several more times. I thought you learned before not to toy with me. You are a small man on screen, and I have cheesy accent. Cheesy accents always win. I'm weird, no?